Did you know that Jordan used to have the best army in the Arab world? Did you know that a British officer actually commanded Jordanian troops against Israel? Some of you on my channel probably do know that, but this is for the uninitiated. For a country of its size with its limited economic means, Jordan has a comparatively professional force, and Jordan's army was one of the few to really give the IDF a run for their money. In this video, we're going to examine the history of Jordan's army and how it developed its martial reputation. Before we get started, a quick word from my sponsor, Ground News.
The news is divided. Ground News puts it back together, so you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. Compare headlines and read full articles to see which details are prioritized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other. Visit ground.news to learn more.
With my thanks to Ground News, back to the video. After World War I, the British took over the area that we now know as Jordan. The British authorities believed it was necessary to form a local military force to enforce internal order and protect from external threats. In October 1920, the British created a force called the Mobile Force, originally comprising 150 men. When King Abdullah ibn Hussein rose to the throne after World War I, he faced tribal challenges to his authority. At King Abdullah's request, the Mobile Force was expanded to battalion size and renamed the Arab Legion. When the Ikhwan under future Saudi King Ibn Saud began carrying out armed raids into Jordan, the Arab Legion, together with the British, checked Ibn Saud's expansion. By 1926, the Legion grew to around 1,500 officers and men. Some of the Legion's officers were British, but most, as well as all of the enlisted personnel, were locally recruited. Between 1926 and the outbreak of World War II, however, the Legion's strength was reduced and it was brought under the command of the British High Commissioner in Jerusalem. They were relegated to internal security duties. The regular British military presence in Transjordan was likewise scaled back. A new force, the Transjordan Frontier Force, was established to handle external security threats. The TJFF was modeled similarly to the British Indian Army, with all ranks above major being held by British officers. This new force, though, proved ineffective against Saudi and Iraqi tribal raiders. As a result, Captain John Bagot Glubb, who would later become known as Glubb Pasha, became the unit's second-in-command, tasked with creating a desert mobile force to counter the tribal warbands. Glubb recruited from local Bedouin tribes and deployed them in a manner more similar to the tribal warbands they fought against. It was World War II when the Legion was given a new lease on life. The Desert Mobile Force and TJFF were amalgamated into the Legion. By the end of the war, the Legion had 8,000 men and officers under arms. The core of this force was a 3,000-strong mechanized brigade and a desert patrol force of 500 men. By this point, Glubb and other British officers commanded the force. During World War II, the Legion saw service in Iraq and Syria, among other places. It is in 1948, though, when the Legion's story gets juicy. In May 1948, Israel declared itself a state. Immediately after, 5 Arab countries invaded Israel. Author Kenneth Pollack writes, "In 1948, when the Arab Legion marched into Palestine, it was the most professional indigenous military in the Middle East." He goes on to say, "The British saw to it that the Legion was well prepared for conventional military operations." Just as Britain relied on a small professional all-volunteer force, so too did Jordan. At the beginning of the Arab-Israeli War of 1948, the Arab Legion was a highly motivated professional force with a strong esprit de corps. Like in other countries, many Jordanian Bedouins were enticed to join by the relatively high pay that military service offered. Also, Bedouins viewed military service as prestigious, and the Legion actually had a high retention rate. This, plus the unit's small size, allowed Jordan to provide quality training to its troops and contributed to the effectiveness of the force. To the force's detriment, however, most of its Bedouin recruits had little to no education or technical training. When the War of 1948 started, the Legion experienced ammunition shortages and they had a limited quantity of heavier weapons. Still, they fielded more heavy weaponry than the Haganah they were to face. They also faced political constraints as their British officers were under orders from London not to assist in offensive action against Israel. Let me also mention something very briefly. Most of the Arab world was controlled by pro-British monarchies, e.g. Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and the Gulf states. Most Arab countries were either under direct British military protection or protected by forces armed and trained by the British. Out of all the Arab belligerents, it was arguably the Jordanians who gained the most. However, this was more so due to the fact that the Jordanians had the most realistic and well-defined war aims rather than the strength of their military. There were even backdoor deals between Jordan and Israel in which the latter would allow the former to conquer territory in the West Bank with little bloodshed. Make no mistake, the Arab Legion still gave the Israelis a run for their money. When war broke out, the Arab Legion took the settlement of Kfar Etzion and prompted the 3 other settlements nearby to surrender. The Jewish quarter in the old city of Jerusalem was captured by the Arab Legion too. During the battles for the settlement of Latrun, the Legion inflicted casualties on the Israelis that were so severe that the Israelis were forced to build a road bypassing Latrun. Eventually, however, the military situation deteriorated to where neither side had a decisive advantage over the other. Both Tel Aviv and Amman knew this. The fight for Latrun had exhausted the Legion's stock of artillery and mortar rounds and hand grenades. King Abdullah unilaterally opened up negotiations with the Israelis. Kenneth Pollack writes, "The conduct of the Arab Legion against the nascent Israeli army in 1948 was, without doubt, the best performance of any Arab military against any foe of the modern era." He goes on to write, "Alone among the Arab armies, the Legion acted and fought like a modern professional military." Let's now fast forward to 1967. During the period between 1949 and 1966, there were border skirmishes between the Jordanians and the Israelis, but those are not our focus here. I'm going to discuss the Six-Day War and the Syrian incursion of 1970. According to author Kenneth Pollack, both the IDF and the Arab Legion were evenly matched in terms of manpower in 1967. However, in terms of equipment, the Jordanians actually had a slight edge. They had recently begun purchasing American weaponry too. Although the British were now gone, Jordan's army still retained much of its British-influenced ways. Jordanian officers still went to the UK for training as well. The Legion expanded in the interim, and its tough Bedouin core had gradually been diluted by urbanites. Once again, much of the fighting between the two would take place around Jerusalem. However, this was not 1948. The IDF, by this time, was a battle-hardened effective force with better equipment than in 1948. One of the biggest weaknesses that the Jordanians dealt with was their cumbersome command and control system. The Jordanians had no divisional or corps formations in their army in order to reduce the threat of a military coup. Communications between Jordanian formations would have to go through Amman. All major decisions had to be approved by King Hussein himself. In addition, Jordan fell under the United Arab Command along with Egypt and Syria. The Jordanians were required to hand over their army to an Egyptian commander-in-chief. The Israelis, for their part, were actually keen to avoid war with Jordan in the beginning. In 3 days though, the IDF defeated the Jordanians and unified Jerusalem under Israeli control. The departure of the British and the structural issues which appear to be endemic to Arab armies had severely degraded the operational capabilities of Jordan's army. Now let me briefly talk about Syria's invasion of Jordan in 1970. In September 1970, King Hussein took military action against the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Palestinian Fedayeen had set up shop in Jordan and used the country as a base to attack Israel from. In addition, Palestinian terror groups' hijackings of civilian airliners on Jordanian territory and calls for the overthrow of the Jordanian monarchy were major irritants for Amman. In response, Syria invaded Jordan the next day with 10,000 troops and advanced toward the city of Irbid. The Jordanians soon counterattacked, and Syrian casualties were so high that the Syrians withdrew from Jordan. They were able to force back the Syrians, but there were some asterisks that came with that. The Jordanians' performance left much to be desired. They were poorly led, and the upper leadership made many crucial mistakes. It should be mentioned that it took several more months to force the Palestinian Fedayeen out entirely. As far as more recent conflicts go, the Jordanians have had few opportunities to fire a shot in anger. Jordan did not take part in the War of 1973 or in the Lebanese Civil War. Neither did Jordan take part in Operation Desert Storm or in the Iraq invasion of 2003. Jordan did send special forces and support personnel to Afghanistan, but their responsibilities were much more limited than those of America's and other coalition countries. The Jordanian Air Force also took part in Operation Inherent Resolve against Daesh. A small country like Jordan was once a military giant within the Arab world. Its army was competent, well-trained, well-led, and relatively well-equipped. However, geopolitics and structural constraints have continuously gnawed away at the Jordanian army's effectiveness. Still, Jordan once bucked the trend of the incompetent Arab state army. The Jordanians have a martial heritage worth celebrating. What do you guys think? Are there any countries that have an army with a story similar to that of Jordan's? Where would you rank Jordan's army within the Arab world? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.